Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the 90th Celebration Alumni Podcast for Monroe College. 90 years going strong is our story at Monroe, and what story would be complete about Monroe College without the Culinary Institute of New York. I am Frankie Costantino Jr., your host, and I have been in the program for about 2 years now. I'm going into my 7th semester. I've worked at the Dining Lab, our fine dining restaurant, for a couple of semesters. I've worked in our kiosk operation, our lunch operation that we have, as well as being on the 2022 National Student Championship team. That was the first to win at Monroe College and was followed up the next year by another championship team. And I'm here with my guest, Dean of the program, Dean Costantino, and it's great to have him.
Thank you so much, Frank. I appreciate that introduction.
Of course, yeah. I mean, you're so decorated, but I mean, I obviously know your story, but for everybody, your story about how you got to Monroe and that encompasses your culinary journey and how you got started there, eventually to end up at Monroe. So I'd love to hear a lot about that.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been at Monroe for 15 years. I had a colleague, a very dear friend, Carol Janice, who was at Monroe from about 2000, 2001. And we worked together at City Tech. And Carol had called me periodically over the decade of 2000 to 2008 or so to come in and be at Monroe. And I always had something going on in my professional life that kept me from Monroe. But in 2000, I finally decided that it would be time for me to come in and became the dean of the program. And I've been the dean ever since. So, we'll talk more about these last 15 years. But my journey really into culinary arts, I was a high school student trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was surrounded by adults in my life that hated their jobs. So I assumed that what you picked for a living was not something you really wanted to do. And then I realized I could become a chef. And that was something that I really wanted to do because I loved cooking. And I stumbled upon the New York City College of Technology in the CUNY system, and I became a student very much by accident. I was just actually attending the school to help a friend of mine register for classes. And when I saw the kitchens, I realized it was my calling. And that's how I got my start. And from City Tech, started working in the industry, became a chef at a very young age. I always was a little bit older than I appeared. I guess I presented older than I was actually. I got a very, very great opportunity to become a chef. And I think I was barely 21 years old and got my first New York Times review. And my career was launched from that point on.
What do you have to say for being able to grow, especially from where you came from? You didn't come from this extensive background. You didn't have all these resources in front of you in order to be able to grow, but to become an executive chef at 21, what do you attribute that to within yourself that you can grow so exponentially in such a short amount of time based off just a small chance or opportunity that you were given and you take the ball and run with it? What do you attribute that to?
Well, that's a great question, and this is something I talk to young people about every day. And that is one of the things that marks my career is that I always was able to recognize an opportunity, to give myself an opportunity to take it or not. And if an opportunity presented itself that was significant, then I went after it. And that was that was just kind of my style. The opportunity to go to college was, as I mentioned, it really happened since I just walked into a kitchen with a buddy of mine, and there was a chef there who was registering students, freshman students, and he started asking me questions. And actually, he filled out my application for me. I wasn't planning on attending the college. I didn't even know there was such a thing when I was a high school student. But when I had that opportunity presented, I grabbed it. When I found out about a position opening for a sous chef, which is the second chef in charge in a kitchen operation, I went after it and I got an opportunity, and the owners of the restaurant liked me so much that they actually replaced the chef and put me in as a chef. That was the opportunity I had there. And that's been characteristic of my career. Fast forward to 2008 when Carol called me for the job at Monroe, the dean's position was open. I had turned it down several times, but I felt like now the timing was right. It was an opportunity for me to really at that age, at that stage of my career, to leave a legacy. And when you have an opportunity to do such a thing, you have to seize it. And so that's really marked the last 15 years for me at Monroe.
Yeah, I love that answer. It's funny how you got started because you got a scholarship and you didn't even know you could have because you were writing. And now one of the major focal points of how we get students is we seek out ones who we think would be exponentially beneficial to our program and would be big standout to me, try to give them as many opportunities financially in order to get them to come here. So it's awesome how that can come full circle. But when you got to Monroe, obviously you had a long journey in between, but when you got to Monroe, I think it was very different than maybe that you expected, but definitely different than how it is now. And we didn't have a lot of the things at the school then than we do now. And I'd like to know about how, because you are the main reason for why these things happen. Why did the competition program start up? Dining lab, kiosk, and your mindset of starting these things that I think a lot of people, when hearing the idea for the first time before it happened, were probably like, that kind of sounds impossible, but you made it possible. And I want to know, maybe if you just want to get started, I think the first thing was the competition program and why you started that and how that went.
Absolutely. I came to Monroe and I recognized very early on that the culinary program was a program of opportunity for students that maybe didn't quite meet the academic
Hmm.
parameters of the college. So there was an opportunity to give them an opportunity to do a trade or a skill, and that would give them employability, which is the goal of the college, right? That's our mission. But that's not how I'm built, right? So I wasn't just going to come into Monroe 15 years ago and run a culinary program. I was going to run the best program in the college, and I was going to run the best program in the country. That's just my mentality. That's my attitude. I'm very competitive, particularly with myself. How much better can I be every other day? I do this, and how much better can my program be, and then my students, etc. I recognized when I got here 15 years ago that the program was underachieving what his potential was, right? So, in case in point, my very first day on the job, December 1st, 2008, it was the final class of our senior culinary students. And they said, "Oh, you're in for a treat. They're going to have lunch in the kitchen. It's the final menu, and we're going to have you in at noon for the menu." I said, "Okay, great." And I remember going into the back of the culinary center, and they'd kind of roll the tables out from the back, and they set up these little card tables with chairs, and
Hmm.
that was the dining room, quote unquote. And the menu was, I remember it very distinctly, it was choice of fish and chips for pot roast. And when I walked into the kitchen, having the experience that I do as a chef, I recognized something had scorched in the kitchen, something had burned. And I realized what that smell was. It was kind of like a meaty smell. So I'm like, when I looked at the menu, I said, okay, well, clearly the pot
Don't know the
roast
pot
burned.
roast.
I'm not going to order that. I ordered the fish and chips, and that's what I got. I got a paper plate. Well, it's a plastic plate with two pieces of fish, some very soggy fries, a little plastic container of coleslaw, and a lemon. And this was the senior class's final statement. That is where my vision for the program saying, no, this is not the final statement of a culinary program. This is like a first semester culinary student preparation, right? Not a
Hmm.
fourth semester. And quite honestly, after that experience, I questioned, wow, how am I going to do this? And I remember very, very vividly calling my wife, your mom, right, and
Yep.
saying, I don't know, I'm sure about this. And her response was, Frank, you're going to change everything anyway. So what are you worrying about? It's a process. And it was a process. And to that point, one of the things that it wasn't so much the food that was served wasn't commensurate with the level that I'd like to be associated with.
Hmm.
It was more so the demeanor of the students. There was a lack of, for lack of a better word, I mean, my mantra has always been pride, passion, and professionalism. That's really been the hallmark of my career. It's what I run on every single blackboard or whiteboard, that when I teach a class or a lab, that's the first thing I
Hmm.
express to the students. There wasn't a whole lot of pride. There wasn't a whole lot of passion. And I questioned the professionalism, if I'm being honest, at that point.
Hmm.
And I knew that was something we had to do. For the pride factor, I've been involved in culinary competitions since around 2000. I've been coaching for 24 years. I brought a pedigree to Monroe as an outstanding culinary coach, one of the top in the country. And I was really determined to build a competition program at Monroe because that's where the pride, passion, and professionalism was going to take root. Very vividly, Frankie, that I had my first faculty meeting in January of 2009, or February 2009, I think it was. And I was here at Monroe for about 2 months. And at the end of the faculty meeting, I said, well, can my culinary faculty stay for a bit? Because I want to just go over a couple of things. And one of the questions I asked was, have we considered getting our students involved in competitions and getting them out there and building some passion and some pride and some Team Monroe kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And the response was not favorable from my faculty at the time. They were very down about it. And really the consensus was our students weren't good enough. And that simply wasn't going to fly for me. I wasn't going to believe that. And so I went into the Culinary Center after that meeting. It was right before 1:00 for our 1:00 classes. Gathered students in the lobby and I said, hey, listen, if you guys are interested in competing and getting involved in culinary competition, come and see me in room 514 at 5:00. And I had 18 students show up after class to that meeting. And that was our
Mm-hmm.
first 8 student competitors. And I worked very hard with those kids. And we had our first 18 ACF medals won in 2009. And that really launched us. We're at 1,011, we're about 1,190 something medals now, I think. I lost count, but it's written on my wall.
Oh,
But that's where the journey began. And what happened was, as I expected it to happen, the kids that came back from that first competition, they wore their medals all the time. But the passion and pride that came from that was palpable. Even people that didn't compete were like, they realized our program had value, was something that I was really determined to build within our student body. Say, hey, you guys can do this. We're going to support you. And look, we're going to set a high standard, but we're going to support you to that standard. And that's how it started.
yeah. And the pride, passion, and professionalism that comes from that, and we're still feeling that to this day. It's about building a brand. It's about building. It's about walking to a building and you have a Monroe chef coat, and someone looks at that and be like, I know exactly who you are, and that's the whole game, right?
Absolutely.
But I think there was obviously that was the start, but there was a turning point, and I want to know about that turning point a couple years down the road. I mean, how did we get from I know how much work you put into those 18 kids to get them to be able to get medals, but let's talk about championships. Let's talk about what was the turning point, what you like around what time and who, I guess I should say, changed that to make our competition program not just a competition program that could bring 18 individual kids back and say that they won medals, but a competition program that can say that we are the best in the country.
Well, that's a great question. So we had 2 things happening simultaneously when I started 2008. I'm going to say 2009 because I was here for a month in 2008, December, and then we started in earnest in 2009. We had to work on curriculum. Clearly, if the end product of our curriculum was subpar fish and chips and pot roast, we had work to do. So simultaneous to me building our competition program, I was also rewriting our entire culinary curriculum. And the goal in rewriting the curriculum was to get it to a point where we could get ACF certification. ACF, or American Culinary Federation, as you know, Frankie, is the standard by which
Yes.
programs are judged. And they're very high standards. So I started very slowly doing 2 things. One, writing new curriculum, but also those faculty that did not believe in our students were replaced. Brought people in that believed in our students, many of whom had worked with me or were my former students, that knew what I was trying to accomplish with the program. And that was extremely helpful in building it. So from 2009 to about 2012, it took 3 years to really overhaul things, right? To establish the dining lab operation. So we had a real world experience for the students, rewriting the curricula to meet the ACF standards. And then, of course, every time I wrote a course in our curriculum, I taught it to make sure that it worked and I was able to tweak it and then make it public for the rest of the faculty to teach. So by 2013, I felt like we were firing on all cylinders. The other thing happening behind the scenes, Frankie, was interesting. When I was here in 2009, I was actually on it. I was taking the train from the Bronx campus, the 4 train, into the city to visit students that were on internship. I wanted to see what was going on, just to understand the scope of our program. When I got on the train, the 4 train, I saw ads for Monroe Culinary and Pastry. And they weren't very good ads, but really what they were they were bringing forth an impulse buy into the program. Meaning people would say, hey, oh, I can make a great sandwich, or I make a great chicken dish. I'm going to be a chef. And well, that's great. And that's great motivation. And for some students, that is the motivation to bring them to culinary school. We were finding we were not getting students that really understood what going to culinary school meant. And for me, that meant going to high school culinary programs and starting to build relationships. When I came to Monroe, I had about 18 years in the industry, in education, in the landscape of education at Monroe in New York City. So I knew all of the teachers. Many of the teachers in high school programs were former students of mine. So I said, you know what? I don't want to advertise the program. I'd rather take that money and put it towards scholarships and then go after these students and go to the high schools and talk to these chefs who I know and say, listen, I'm at Monroe. We're going to give opportunities, to send them to me. And I remember this very, very distinctly. I called our marketing director, a gentleman named Craig Patrick, a lovely man. I was on with the college. I called Craig and I said, Craig, I got to talk to you about these ads. He says, Frank, we don't have any budget for more ads. I said, no, I don't want you to write more ads. I want to take them all down. He said, what? I want to take that money that we're spending on these ads and put them towards scholarships for students. And I'm going to go get students for the program. So in the early days, I never received a phone call from President Stephen Jerome. At the time when I started, President Stephen Jerome was the president. And I received a phone call. That's if I was okay. Just, Frank, how you doing? How's everything going? Are you okay? Hey, President Jerome, I'm fine. He said, well, I know you talked to Craig Patrick about taking the ads down. I said, President Jerome, I have a plan. I have a vision. I said, I'm going to go after the best students. I'm going to build the best program, not just at the college, but I'm going to be in the top rankings of culinary programs in the country within the next 5 to 7 years. To his credit, and I love Stephen Jerome, he said, okay, we trust you. I'm not sure if he did, but he said, we trust you. And we pulled the ads down, and I started traveling around to different programs. So 2013, we started to see the benefits of that. We started getting kids into the program from culinary programs through CCAP and ProStart and schools where I recruited heavily. And we had a great core of students in 2013 coming in. And in 2013, we fielded our best culinary team to that point. And we had to go to Culinary America to compete for the New York State Championship. And it was an unbelievable competition. It's actually chronicled in our Monroe Culinary episodes, which I know many people have seen.
Gabby Grande series.
Yeah, the Monroe Culinary series. And we did not win in 2013. We actually lost to the Culinary America by 0.3 of a point. But to that point, that put us on the map. And actually so much so that was the last year that the Culinary America actually competed in the state championship, regional championships, because they felt like, wow, this school is coming up too fast, too strong. We cannot lose to Monroe College. That's not going to bode well for us. And they actually never competed again after 2013. And then we started to really get traction. 2015, we won our first state championship. And then we just went on a tear. We've been regional champions for the last 5 years, back-to-back national championship. We've been to nationals. And I know you know this, but we've been to nationals every year since 2015, right? With either or team. So that's a pretty impressive run. 9 years straight and counting, right? We have to get back there again this year. So that was really the turning point for us, 2013. And it was really the product of a lot of very strategic visioning for me to build to that point. And that really changed not just the program dynamic in terms of competition, but it changed the program dynamic overall, right?
100%. Yeah, I'm very interested in the start of, as well, the dining lab program. I mean, we've been reviewed by New York Times. I know the Westchester local newspaper called us, what was it? Something like world's best kept secret, and New Rochelle's best
That's
kept
kept
secret.
secret. Yeah.
And I want to know how that got
Way
started,
more.
because in such an operation like ours, it's unbelievable that we could have something that can genuinely be considered a fine dining establishment. 3 courses, high-end production, high-end menus, and I want to know how that started and how it transformed.
It's actually a funny story. So at the time, Mark Giron was executive vice president, and we had a vision to run a campus restaurant. Mark was extremely supportive of our program. We had a whole architectural sketch and everything. We were going to take actually the library in Franklin Hall. The library space was going to be the restaurant. And one thing led to another. There was, I think at the time we were building Gaddy Hall, and there were just resources can only go so far. And I
Mhm.
think we kind of fell off the radar because of the resource allocation to open a restaurant was expensive, especially with construction. So it didn't fly. At the time, we were renting space over at the Mac. We had a kitchen there, a restaurant there called the Olympic Room, which was a sports bar, which was not open. So I actually ran for the first couple of semesters, I actually ran dining room classes through the Olympic Room, which most people
Oh, wow.
don't know.
I didn't even know
Uh,
that.
yeah, we didn't have a dining lab class. I did a regional Italian cuisine class, which we did service to the public. We did regional French cuisine to service to the public. And that was really our kind of our testing grounds. But the Olympic Room was terrible. It was a very dark room. It was in the back of the Met. It was off Main Street. It was, for many reasons, didn't want it working out. And actually, the college wound up taking the space and turning it into the new cafeteria. So when they moved the cafeteria from Main Hall to the Olympic Room, Main Hall became vacant and it was set up. It had a kitchen, it had a dining room. The
Mm.
plan was, I think, to make it kind of a student union room. I remember one
Mhm.
day these guys coming in with TVs to put like these big screen TVs up in the dining lab. They're like, "Oh yeah, we got these TVs. We're putting these up." I said, "Oh no, you guys are in the wrong room. These guys, you got to go down to the Olympic room. These TVs are going into the Olympic room." Well, my vision was to take that cafeteria and turn it into a restaurant.
What it is now.
And to the administration, and I don't think they really kind of knew what I was talking about. Or I think they were very nice to me to say, "Well, okay, Frank, go ahead and do it." They didn't really understand what we were trying to accomplish.
Until they
We
set foot
opened up,
in it themselves.
and we had essentially a couple of portable burners. It was all electric kitchen, not particularly well equipped. The dining room, we used the existing chairs and tables from the cafeteria, but I was determined to give the students a real world experience. I don't think you can have a culinary program without it. We needed to have paying customers coming in and having some skin in the game, so to speak. When you give food away, it's all good. People love it. Oh, thank you. Well, when you and even a modest price tag, you set an expectation. And initially we
Mhm.
started at 1995 for a 3-course menu, completely student run, right?
Mhm.
And that was our entry point. The third week of our service semester, well, first semester we did this spring, I think it was spring of 2012, if I'm not mistaken, 2013. I have to go back and look at that. It's 11 years, so 2013, I believe. I was called out to the dining room because there was a table that wanted to ask me some questions. So I went out and I spoke to these 2 women that were there. And one of them said, "Oh, I told my friend she has to come and taste the dinner because you guys are wonderful." And she was a writer for the Times and she's writing an article on the Bocuse room up at CIA. And I said, "Well, if you're writing an article on them, you got to come to the dining lab." And she
Yeah.
said, "Oh, this is a wonderful experience." And she wrote the article. And actually, I was a little concerned because, you never know how things in the editorial process are going to go. She
Mhm.
wrote the article and it was very favorable to us. And she called us the little engine that could, right? My goal,
Yeah.
Frankie, when I got Bro, I wanted our program to be in the dialogue with the best schools in the country, the Johnson and Wales and CIAs. I said, if we can get to a point where we could be in the dialogue with those kinds of schools, then we have put Monroe Culinary or Culinary New York and Monroe College on the map, right?
Mhm.
So now she wrote an article and she really compared us very favorably to this mega restaurant this brand new restaurant up at the CIA, the Bocuse Room, and with all the millions that they put into it, and basically said this meal was just as good. We enjoyed it. Just had something special about it. It was like seeing the students and everything. And the next week, it was like an explosion. Our phones went off the hook. People trying to get into the restaurant, and that really catapulted us. And we were not prepared for it. We were really
Mhm.
thinking about a soft opening, like let's see how things go for a semester. And of course, the very next week after the article came out, right before the service started, we had a power outage. We had a problem, right? So what we did was
Yeah.
I brought out some portable burners and we cooked dinner that way. And it was probably one of the best culinary classes that we had because it was a real world solution to a problem, right? The kids were like, well, how are we going to do this, Dean? I'm like, we're going to get some portable burners and we're going to cook. Early on,
Gotta do what you gotta do.
I remember vividly in the middle of service, the smoke detectors went off because our exhaust system wasn't pulling smoke out strong enough. We had to bring
Mhm.
the guests over to the culinary center. I was doing a presentation. I did a cooking demo while they were waiting for the fire department to clear the dining lab so we can come back in to finish dinner. These are great memories, but it's and very fun memories. But where we are now is a product of a few important ingredients. One, it was the vision, and then the support of our faculty and staff to achieve that vision. But most importantly, it was our students. And the thing I remember the most vividly in the early days, when and still to today, and you've experienced this, when it's service time, it's like the switch goes off. The kids get
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, we serving the public now. We gotta be on point. Let's get set
Yep.
up. And that was what we were trying to accomplish. And we hit that every single day with our dining lab being open. When it turns 6:30, it's game on, and the kid and the students know that on both sides, not just the culinary, because as you know, the
Yep.
dining room in front of the house, right? Run the dining room. The students do the cooking. The pastry students bake all the breads and everything. It's totally student driven. But when that service time hour comes, 6:30 PM, it's like a whole new a switch goes off. It's a whole new
Mhm.
mindset.
Yeah, I mean, we've had guests that have come over 100 times to the dining lab. We have people that are really dedicated to our dining lab
Yeah.
program, and that's just a testament to how much of an impact we've had on the general public and the people around us. And to go toe to toe with a school like the Culinary Institute of America and be able to come out even equal or on top of them in an article like something coming out of the New York Times is truly a fantastic milestone to hit for our college. You go out a lot. You have great relationships with places like CCAP, Food Education Fund, a lot of BOCES programs in our area. You fly out, you do this type of recruitment, and that's so important to our school. Do you find challenges trying to promote this Culinary Institute of New York, Monroe College, when you're faced with such a behemoth like the Culinary Institute of America, and that name within itself is almost just enough marketing for anybody to want to go there? What is the challenge with trying to market against them, even if you know that we have the pedigree and we have the history and we have the operations to back up why a lot of students should come here? What are the challenges trying to recruit students when confronting with other schools, and how do you go about convincing them that Monroe is the best choice?
Well, that's a great question, Frankie. I to this day, whenever I go to CIA and I judge pro start competitions up there, or I visit friends of mine up there, it's like me going to Yankee Stadium when I get there. I'm a big Yankees fan, as you know.
Mhm.
And there's just an
Yes, of
aura.
course.
It's the Harvard of culinary schools, and that's not going to change. That's
Mhm.
why I said, I'm looking to be in the dialogue in terms of like when students are thinking about culinary schools, CIA, Johnson Wales, CIA, and why? Well, wait a second, culinary student in New York. Oh yeah, right. 15 years ago, that was hard. I remember going to
Yes.
visit schools, and the faculty that were inviting me to visit their schools were wearing like CIA t-shirts or CIA sweatshirts. Right?
Hmm.
I'm like, wow, this is kind of, not so cool, right? Like I'm coming to
Hmm.
do a demo from Monroe College, and this guy's wearing a CIA sweatshirt.
Yeah.
What I found was very quickly, I knew a lot of the faculty that were teaching at the schools that I was going to, and I relied on those relationships. So, for example, I would go to food and finance, and at the time, Michael Lynch, dear friend and great educator, now retired, ran the food and finance program. He was the key guy that did all the CCAP and ProStart stuff with food and finance. And I knew Michael from my days at City Tech. And and I went to Michael and said, listen, I'm at Monroe. He's like, oh, well, Monroe. I'm like, yeah, listen, I know, but I'm there and I'm building it and I need your help. I need great students. And he says, Frank, based on your reputation, I'm going to send you as kids because I know you're going to do a good job. And that was kind of the sentiment going around in those days. It was like, oh, Frank's at Monroe. We're going to send him some kids because he's doing the right thing. That's how CCAP also got started with us. We had a relationship with CCAP when I got to Monroe in 2008. But I remember being at odds with Richard Grousman, who was also a dear friend, longtime friend, but we were not getting the best students from CCAP. Oh, wait a second. Why are we not getting the same students that CIA is getting or Johnson Wales is getting?
Hmm.
And that was a bit of a contentious moment for us with CCAP. And I said to Richard Grousman, I said, Richard, you know me for a long time. You know the kind of program I'm going to run. I need you to help me. I need your best students. And really, to his credit, he said, you know what? I believe in you, Frank. I respect you. And we started changing the dynamic and getting the better students because he knew that I was going to create a program that was going to be at that level. So I got a lot of help early on. I cashed in a lot of my reputation because I came to Monroe with that pedigree and reputation and it really had a lot of help along the way. And then naturally, once you start winning championships, as we started in the mid 2000s, 14, 15,
Yeah.
16,
You're not going to have to
things
cash in. They'll
became,
send them right to you.
right. Things became much easier because people knew us. And then with our rebranding in 2015, 2016, that was critical as well to our program as well, because we became the cornerstone of New York at Monroe College. And I think that put us in a very different playing field. From that time on, we started appearing in the top 10 list of best culinary schools in the country. Certainly in the region, we've been number one in the region for several years now. And that
Hmm.
our
And this is
region
probably the
consists
toughest region.
of, yeah, Johnson Wales and CIA. So we're extremely proud of that. But that's all come from a very calculated approach to building the program, to what it is. And in the middle of the 2000 to 2010 to 2020 decade, we started to model our schools after school outside management and the coast of New York, because we had achieved something no other school had, which was a national footprint for our
Hmm.
school. I remember very vividly being at a strategic planning session with Mark Jerome leading the session and him saying, we want to move to a schools of distinction model and the quintessential school of distinction. Our college is a school of hospitality management and the Coast of New York, because we met all the objectives of what he saw were a school.
Hmm.
We had the national footprint, we had the community outreach, we had the aspirational piece, which was kids coming to our program because they want to be part of our competition team or they want to go study abroad, or there were things that we were offering that were significant. And the final piece to that, and it's kind of half joking, but when students ask me now, you know, I'm thinking between CIA and CINY, I'm trying to make a decision. I said, well, let me make it easy for you. I don't work at the CIA. I work at
Yep.
CINY.
Hmm.
know,
I tell them that all the time. Yeah.
that helps them out.
Yeah. You mentioned CCAP, and I've worked closely with so many students coming from CCAP. We just ended a really successful boot camp, which is when the juniors who are through the CCAP program win in their respective regions. And they get to actually come to our school for a couple of days, stay in the dorms, and they have some intense training for their seniors competition to get some scholarships and all of that. And I'm curious to how did it start that the CCAP junior winners actually came to Monroe and you oversaw them and kept them in the dorms and actually trained them. How did that start? Because you've had a relationship with CCAP for so long, but feels like it's getting better as time goes on.
Well, yeah, that's a great question too, Frank. I mean, we started the CCAP boot camps about 13 years ago. And really, for me, it was more about my relationship with the faculty, right, that were teaching in the CCAP program. And
Mhm.
them saying to me, hey, it would be great if we can get our seniors some intensive training as they come into their senior year, so we can help them get opportunities for scholarships as seniors. And I said, you know what? I'll run a boot camp and we'll figure out how to get these kids into the boot camp, what the selection process will be. But every teacher teaching at the high school level, CCAP, naturally they want their kids to win a scholarship because that's a feather in their cap. And it's very
Yep.
competitive. A lot of schools, particularly in New York, but also out of market. I mean, if you go to Arizona, Los Angeles, there's tons of high schools that are CCAP high school. So the faculty came to me and said it would be great. I remember having a conversation with Chef Sean out of Glendale, Arizona, about 10, 12 years ago. And him then saying, it'd be great if we could do
Yeah.
something. I said, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
We'll tack it on to the end of the spring semester. And we ran our first one, 12, I think 13 years ago. And it's the CCAP selection process became part of having the juniors compete as juniors for a shot at the boot camp. That was the grand prize, and get them ready for the senior competition,
Mhm.
seniors. And we've had some tremendous juniors come to us, and many come to us after the high school's done to become students of ours. We had a young lady 2 years ago. I know you remember her very well, Vanessa
Mhm.
Ruiz, who we bonded very quickly. She was a very talented young lady. I'm like, I'd love to have you come to Monroe, and we kept in touch. She actually flew to New York to compete in high school chef. Just a wonderful experience. And of course, she was a freshman on our culinary team, won a national championship, was also student pastry chef, Northeast Regional Student Pastry Chef for the year. So we've seen
Yeah.
that happen a lot of students that have come to us in boot camp. So for me, it's a recruitment tool, but it's also my way of giving back to CCAP and saying, hey, I'm going to help you build a better senior for your senior competition. So it's a win-win for
Mhm.
everybody.
Yeah. And it encourages them to want to send the students up here because they know that they're going to get that proper training, right? But
Absolutely.
something that you always say in the kitchen is that you think in seconds, not minutes. And I think that can also be applied in a different area to where you are no stranger to flying across the entire country, going to places like Phoenix, going to places like LA, just for the chance to get two, three, four more students guaranteed in your program next year. Take days out of your time, countless hours, flights, all this time, just to get a couple students and to reach out to just a select few. I think a lot of other people think in big numbers. They're like, I want all the students. What can I do to get the most students? But something that you always stress is quality. And not only that, but a lot of other schools, you go there and a lot of students don't even know who the dean is, or they're not even sure like who their upper management is. But you're teaching the Cole 1 lecture class, the introductory courses, as well as the advanced courses like the pastry courses. I guess my question is like, why do you feel like the need to do something like that? I don't think a lot of other professors or deans or presidents in the country would go so far out of their way to be present to so many, maybe so many small, like not too many students, or to put themselves out there in front of all your students. What does that say about you and why do you do it?
Well, I think it really drives my main motivation in life. I'm an educator, no question. I'm a culinarian. I love it all. But at the end of the day, Frankie, I'm about inspiring people. my goal is always when I interact with a student, with a young person, with someone looking to learn, that interaction with me gives them an advantage for the rest of their lives. In other words, they've learned something from me. They've had some inspiration from me that gives them an opportunity to be better. And that's always been what's driven me. That's what's driven me in education. I want to make a difference in people's lives. When I travel and I tell this to the students, I say to them, look, I'm here to give you the possibilities. Whether you choose to come or not, I'm here to promote my program, but I'm here to promote an understanding that don't let anyone put you in a box. Don't let anybody contain you. If you have dreams and aspirations, there's a way for you to go about it. And here's the way. And I share my story with them and that inspiration about how I was told when I was in college, I wasn't college material, about my guidance
Hmm.
counselor. And now here I am. I'm a doctor. I'm one of the only people in the country to have a doctorate and certifications at executive chef and executive pastry chef levels. I think I might be the only person in the country with those right now. So that's what I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to inspire people. And if that
Hmm.
inspires them to come to our program, even better. But the other piece of it is I go after students who I think are going to be standouts in our program because I do believe in the adage that a rising tide floats all boats, right? When you've got really great students, everybody benefits from that. So everybody comes up to that level. And that's what we've seen in the last 13 or 14 years here at the school, that
Hmm.
we've gotten better students and that makes everybody else better. It gets an outward expression of our program and our competitions and sending kids out to work and people saying, your kids are great. And that's really what it's
Hmm.
all about. I mean, for me, it's simple. I'm just looking to inspire people. If that means they're coming to me to be a student of mine, that's great. But I'm not going to be naive to say I'm going to go out and I'm going to go out to a room, speak to 30 kids, and they're all going to sign up for Monroe.
Yep.
That's not the preface. I'm looking to inspire people, and if that inspiration leads them to us, so be it. I'll continue to work with them, but I want them to leave with something every time I interact with them of a positive nature, of a feeling like, hey, you know what? This guy, I didn't even know this guy. He came, talked about some stuff. I'm inspired to want to do better. That's what it's all about for me.
100%. I guess the final thing I mean, this is obviously an anniversary podcast talking so much about our history, but I think it's interesting to ponder about our current situations and our future as well. If you ask me, I genuinely think that Monroe is in its own golden age. I do. I was a part of the team that won our first national championship in 2022. This past year, we just secured an even bigger margin of usually competitions that end within a point range. We won by 10 points 2 years in a row, being able to secure a national championship spot, having SCOY and P-SCOY, pastry chef and student chefs, compete at a national level or a regional level. And on top of that, being able to promote our college through the newly created Expo on Excellence podcast, revamping our social media. I think these are all things that are further. I think these are the next steps into growing our program beyond. We have the history, we have the pedigrees, we have the milestones. And now it's just about even further getting that out there and growing this program, especially from the rubble of COVID and getting back out there and getting back not only to what our school used to be, but even beyond that. I mean, just to end, I just want to hear your thoughts about, I guess, the last couple of years and where we're headed.
Yeah. So great insight, Frankie. The pandemic that really hurt us, hurt our industry.
Hmm.
And it hurt our prospects in terms of students wanting to come into the industry. Nobody wants to enter a burning building, and during the pandemic, our industry was burning. I remember sitting doing a virtual podcast back, I think it was maybe 3 months into the lockdown, and people saying, could you join us to get some insights on where you think the industry is going to be? And I think I was the only person in the podcast that actually had an optimistic look. There were people saying it's going to take 10 years for our industry to
Hmm.
recover. It's going to be 1 year for every month that we're locked down. I'm like, you know what? I believe in the human spirit. As soon as we're available to open our restaurants, people are going to flock to them. People want to eat. People want to have social time. And I likened it to the Spanish flu, right? If you think about it,
Mhm.
1919, devastation. In 1920, the Roaring Twenties begin. The Roaring Twenties
Uh-huh.
was characterized by violence, drinking
Mhm.
too much, probably led to prohibition,
Yeah.
but also food, restaurants. Delmonico's was opened, the famous
Yeah.
Delmonico's restaurant. I mean, unbelievable stuff. And so I really believe that history repeats itself. And I'm like, wait a second, guys. Some things might be affected. I knew business travel would be slow to come
Yeah.
back because things were going remote, but people got to eat. And I knew
Yeah.
within a year the industry was going to be, incredible. And I remember my wife and I, mom and I went down to Nashville for a few days because we missed our anniversary with the pandemic. So we said, let's go away for a
Yeah.
few days. Man, we couldn't get into a restaurant. And this was only a few months
Booming.
after the lockdown. We couldn't get a meal. We had to wait, like, waiting list. I'm like, wow, this is unbelievable. The streets packed, the bars packed. And I'm like, I knew this was going to happen, and it's been consistent. But the best thing that came out of it was that the operators and the entrepreneurs that run our industry said, hey, you know what? We got to pay people better because we need people, and no one wants to work on our industry because we've historically not paid well, right? So I was
Yeah.
talking to a young lady, Lillian, in our boot camp,
It's
and
rapidly
I said, oh,
changing.
you work in Burger in Arizona. What are they paying? She said,
Yep.
oh, they're paying $19 an hour. $19 an hour.
That's a lot of money
3 years ago,
for a fast food
our
place.
students graduating, right, were making $16 an hour working on the line in a
Yeah.
high-end restaurant. So
Yeah. I
it's
started at
changed. I've
$8
seen
an hour
that.
5 years ago.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I think it's all good. It's all good, man. It's,
Yeah.
we are poised. We came back from the pandemic with a focus to rebuild our program, to get ourselves back out there, to do the things that we did when we built the program, focus on our students and their accomplishments, getting
Yeah.
better students.
100%.
That was we're right back to where we were, in 2009, 2010. And we're going to see our program steadily rebuild. We're very devastating times for us.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm excited to see what we can do in the future to get ourselves out there more. I'm excited. I mean, the students that I see coming in this fall, and even with the boot camp, we get a glimpse at what next fall can look like. And I think it's great. I think it's all good. I think there's some students that are really passionate, they're really prideful, and they're really professional, I guess. I can't put it in better words myself, right? All right. I think that'll end it for the 90th Alumni Podcast, 90 Years Strong, for the Monroe story. Thank everybody for listening, and you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Frank.